The long-dreaded, or perhaps at this point, honestly, it'd be more correct to say the long-expected day is finally here, with the pruning of Terras' noble sons, as now we have female Adeptus Custodes, with either a rather Aquilian schnorzed woman, or more women that are simply indistinguishable from men. And in addition to the brand new law, also comes brand new retcons with which to justify them. For you see, Custodes are no longer the sons of Terra noble houses. Now, I know that was kind of, key and core to the creation of the Custodian Guard in its entirety. The idea of holding the sons of noble houses both hostage, whilst also imparting upon them an honor they could not refuse, thereby forcing them to give up their most precious assets, their eldest heir. But no, that's not actually what happened. No. That wasn't the only source of recruitment. Others might have been more equally overt or far more secretive. Noble daughters could also have been taken, and at some point you run out of noble houses, even after you've conquered all of Terra. The next war machine of the Imperium still requires a constant churn of recruits. Yes, we have reduced the Custodian Guard to just more recruits now. We were just snatching random girls off the streets to fulfill gender quotas at one point. And hey, let's be fair here, we can't take an exclusive male faction, and it, make no mistake, is the exclusivity that is being attacked here first and foremost, without also taking that faction and dragging it through the dirt, humiliating and desecrating it, because the hallmark of diversity is to make something lesser than what it was, and don't worry, we know very much what's happening next, as, make no mistake also, by the way, this is merely just a dress rehearsal for female Space Marines, because Games Workshop is a woke as shit company that desperately wants to throw off the cowering hide of 40k, to discard all of its fans and become the progressive company it so desperately desires to be. This is why Tom Mendelsohn, despite his reprehensible comments about Charlie Kirk, lauding the assassination in essence, still has a job at Games Workshop. Because they hate you. Again, I reiterate, Games Workshop is not your friend. They are your enemy, and they are probably likely to forever remain one. But before we get into the new lore as well of some more, let's have a look at what we've actually got here. So, the most obviously female Custodes is this shield captain with her rather chiseled schnauzer right here, and the Emperor's laurels, of course, because, you gotta hammer home the point there. And a brand new top knot. For some reason. I don't know about the top knot. The old helmet looked great. I don't know why they suddenly have like a dark Eldar top knot thing. What? Did the woman have a complex about her height? And I'm like, no. My helmet must be taller. I must be respected for my height, you see. Whatever you want, bitch. And move on. Other Custodes are either androgynous, like this guy over here, who just looks like a twink. A shaved-headed twink. Or you've got an actual male model who is this one, whose face resembles that of a screaming baby. Entirely accidental, I'm certain. Or just really muscular women. Yeah, no, literally. Just a very muscular woman, straight up. And the piece de resistance as well, because you can think what you want about the new weird top knot. Again, I don't like it, and the old helms were way better, but I have always made a certain point, and that is that diversity, progressivism, DEI, wokeism is corrosive. It is a damaging ideology, because if it wasn't, then who wouldn't care? If this was simply just, okay, well, we're just gonna have some female models, then it didn't interfere with anything, there would be no problem. Just like with the Sisters of Battle, or the eternally ignored Sisters of Silence, of course. But whenever you do diversity, you must always destroy something. Something is always lessened. This is the ironclad rule of alchemy. And we go even beyond their lore, where they're now just random street urchins recruited for the Imperial war machines turning along. No. We've got something worse here. So, the Guardian Spear is, of course, the signature weapon of the Custodian Guard. However, they forgot the trigger mechanism. You know, the thing that allows you to fire the weapon, which is found on the underside of the Custodian Spear, is now gone. They forgot about it. You can see it here in the Lord drawings themselves. You can see it here on a model. Even the goddamn Joy Toys got this correct. But Games Workshop, the creator, supposedly, of Warhammer 40,000, could not be arsed to double check because, again, say it after me, wokeism is corrosive. You cannot add in gender politics into a thing without lessening it. It is impossible, because once you care more about politics than you care about your own universe, this stuff happens. And I noticed this literally minutes before I started recording this video right here. It is unavoidable and equally inexcusable at the same time. What else did we learn from today's, yesterday's live stream? Well, we've got a lot more gender-neutral pronouns, as noted here by Chainsword. Now, this has been around for a while, mind you, both in the books and in Games Workshop at large as inclusive language. This is simply just another example of they want to be a woke company. They want to sneak this in wherever they can, and to be fair, all of the people who were, let's be fair and frank here, coping over the idea that the female Custodes weren't canon. No. This isn't a question of rogue interns. This isn't by accident. All of this is obviously by design. Games Workshop hates you. Personally, if you are a fan of 40k products from years ago, you are the enemy. They actively think of you as the opposition, and the only reason why they haven't thrown this all in your face immediately is because they know too many people will leave to get away with it. That is why they boiled the frog on female Custodes for years and years, and also it's why it's very important to make noise about this, and especially this idiocy right here. Hold it up as a shining fucking banner of incompetence. And of course, Sisters of Silence, nothing. They're irrelevant. And they're irrelevant because they're not popular. This has nothing to do with diversity or representation. You could simply expand upon the Sisters of Silence range. You could expand upon Sisters of Battle. You could expand upon female Imperial Guard regiments. You could expand upon female Inquisitors. You have an infinite area of opportunities here that isn't the specifically stated to be male faction. And the only people who are happy about this are the tourists. Now, there are some reasonable arguments to be made here, like Omni here. Them getting rid of Forgewell and going plastic is the big winner. That is absolutely correct. We should note that as well. The reason why the Custodes were a little bit iffy in popularity were because of two things. One, their increased popularity was because they were brutally overpowered, and two, their weird lack of popularity amongst normal people was because they were Forgewell products, which means half of them is going to break before you get your hands on them just due by shipping. And making them all go plastic is a genuine step forward to make the range more accessible to people beyond 30k. But, like again, heads can be swapped if it gets you tilted. That's not the point. Again, the entire idea of it is corrosive. It is damaging. And the only way you can view it any other way is, again, if you are a consumer first. If you're more upset about female custodians, then you are absolutely right. All the tanks went plastic, you got brain rot. No, you have brain rot consumer. You look at the desecration of law, the removal of law, the ruination of it, the reduction of the custodies, the obvious drop in quality, passion, and interest, and all you can do is, ooh, plastic. You would be better served of simply just going out into the woods and gathering some logs and rocks and playing 40k with those, because you have no actual interest in what lies behind the plastic. Your only connection here is to a thing that is popular, and you would consume that thing regardless, as you have here made very evident. You do not give two shits about the custodies, you give a shit about the fact that the thing you consume is now easier to consume. And then there is the law. So, Games Workshop were clearly expecting the backlash. Obviously they were. This is yet again very much so them testing the waters, as I would imagine female Space Marines would come during the Amazon television show, or at the very least there is going to be a very prominently featured female Custodes in that show. Is this a new thing? Well, yes and no. No, this is a completely brand new thing. Up until this point, those few Legio and Adeptus Custodes miniatures we've seen without helmets have been obviously male, and the rest have been so armored that it is hard to tell. The new range is a mix of both male and female Custodes. No, all of the Custodes were male. You have told us so. Even the names of your new lines is basically Roman words for brotherhood. Have you changed the law? I thought all Space Marines and Custodes were male. Have you changed the law? Yes, but allow me to add in a dodge there. Space Marines, yes. Law-wise, Space Marines are made from human males, willing aspirants or unwilling conscripts on the cusp of adolescence. They are subject to a series of horrific trials, and the strongest emerge as remorseless killers that humanity stripped away so they can serve as living weapons in the Emperor's armies. There are no female Adeptus Astartes. Allow me to shit in the well as vociferously and aggressively as possible. I am poisoning this one to make you think that the Custodes are any different. No, if anything, the Custodes are even more ideologically pure zealots, okay? The kind of horrific shit that a Space Marine might still balk at is everyday operations for the Custodes. That is why the Custodes were placed within the Legionis Astartes way back in the day to look for betrayal in things like Lorgar's Legion, whereas they had no hesitation whatsoever to turn their weapons upon Space Marines, something that even the traitor legions required some getting used to. Custodes are not Space Marines. Yes, they are. Other than the obvious point that they are both towering gene-enhanced warriors, the similarities pretty much stop there. So the similarities are everything. Custodes are taken as infants and recreated by ancient science. So are the Space Marines. The process is arcane and bespoke to each individual. No, it's not. The Emperor himself retained oversight of the process, at least until the whole Horus Heresy thing went down. So, the idea that this is bespoke and arcane is nonsense in the current day world. Now, I know this is also part of the original Custodes lore, but it's nonsense. It is utter nonsense. Back in the day when the Custodian Guard were a very, very specific resource and basically finite, you only had so many of them, fine. But now that you can apparently still produce them, the Emperor isn't there anymore. And this also, the appeal to the Emperor himself retained oversight. You've written it into the law that the Emperor was a passive observer in the creation of the Space Marines. He wasn't even the final authority on the Adeptus Astartes. This is nonsense. but aren't the Custodes made from the sons of Terran noble houses? Some of them are, yes. Okay, I remind you again, the entire point and purpose of the Adeptus Custodes was to ask for the heirs of all the noble houses, as in essence both hostages, and also people to be cushioned in such a way that they could not be refused. See, if you went to a noble house and said, I want your son as a hostage, that might cause some consternations or some plausible excuses for opposite activities. If, however, you say, I want to make your son my honor guard, now there is no plausible reason to deny. The Emperor is all about symbolism and authority, so these pre-unification patriarchal houses that passed their kingdoms down to the firstborn sons had those sons taken and remade as guardians of the Emperor. That is still true, but that was not the only source of recruitment. Other methods might have been equally overt, others far more secretive. Noble daughters could have also been taken, and at some point you run out of noble houses. Again, noble daughters, no, because it was the heirs of the houses. That is what made it important. And at some point, you run out of noble houses. Irrelevant. The Custodes have literally stood by for the last 10,000 years, specifically because there wasn't enough of them. Your own law contradicts you, not to mention the obvious logistical problems of taking noble daughters. You know, the ones that breed noble sons. And if you continue to deplete that gene pool, you are going to run into some serious issues really fucking fast. And then, of course, the inexorable war machine of the Imperium still requires a constant churn of recruits. This is an obvious idiot tourist take. The Custodes aren't recruits. They aren't a part of the churning Imperial war machine. They are scalpel devices created and honed to the absolute utmost of quality to carry out the most specific of missions. They are the honor guard of the Emperor, not a fucking white shield. Oh, and they forgot the trigger on the sword as well, incidentally. How different are the male and female Custodes? All Custodes, male and female, embodied the pinnacle of the genetic and cellular engineering the Emperor employed while creating his armies. They're all flawless creations pushed beyond the limits of human potential. There is no difference in combat efficiency between a male Custodes and a female Custodian, which introduces yet another issue. Okay, so this is a common argument for female Space Marines. Listen, we're just using genetic nonsense here. We could just take the women and just make them just as strong as the men. Okay, here's the thing. A female's muscle mass is lower than that of a male, restrictively so. Thus, if you could simply just take a woman and make her as strong as a man, that means that you take a restricted chassis. So let's say 50%. A woman can only have 50% of a male's muscle mass. So just take a number as an example here. If you can then argue that science can simply add another 50%, why the fuck aren't you adding that to the males? That would make far more sense. If we simply magically say you can just make them stronger regardless of the chassis, just put that strength on the chassis that is already stronger. It is obviously just a nonsensical excuse. And again, the reason why you don't buy the excuse is because it leads to lazy shit. This is corrosive. It isn't merely a change of paint or a different head. This is an ideology, and it will destroy the thing. We know this. This isn't a mystery. This isn't our first rodeo. We aren't confused about anything. We've seen it in every other setting that has adopted it. We know by now, in the same way that if you toss a ball in the air, you can reasonably expect it to come back down again at some point. But we all knew this was going to happen. We all knew this was coming. And again, the people who deluded themselves into thinking that this was just not going to happen, Games Workshop wants this to happen. They desire it. And as I've already said in my Parasites video, 40k is pretty much locked into its course right now. It's going to be Star Wars. It's going to be really popular. Its value is going to continue to rise for a good 10 years, probably, but it will crater, as did Star Wars. There is simply no way that a project, that a setting can survive gender ideology, because we have yet to see a single instance of a setting that could. But, of course, when one thing dies, it does open an opportunity for other things. Most of you probably already know, but myself, in cooperation with Sargon, am also working on some projects of our own. Now, we have one that's getting fairly close to a public reveal, and another that we're still just teasing, but even if 40k is dying, and make no mistake, it is, that does not mean that everything will die with it. Even in the ashes of a devastating fire, new life will spring into being, sooner or later. Until next time, I've been Arch. Thank you all very much for watching, and I do hope to see you all again soon. Till then, have a good day.